I said, baby, here I am. I'm the man on the scene. I can give you what you want, but you got to come home with me. I got some good old love and I got some more in store. When I get through throwing it on you, you're gonna come back for more. The boys and things that come by the dozen, but that ain't nothing but the drugstore loving. Pretty little thing, let me light your candle, cause mama, I'm sure hard to handle now, yes I am. Anyway, so here's another topic to talk about. If y'all want to pay attention, if you don't, well, I'm glad you dropped in for a second to hear me sing inexpertly and amateurishly. I've had some people ask me what's the deal with the name Slick Jimmy. Why do I use that as my handle? And I'd used it in the past, in my younger days, in the dog days of summer. And as I wrote this story, I started to want to interject a certain character into the story that was kind of like the first son of Lost Peaks. He's the representative of the House Eternal, or the House Eternus is the proper name. And he's the last of that house to still reside in Lost Peaks, because the rest of them basically abandoned it. They think it's a lost cause, trying to save the Sodom and Gomorrah that is Lost Peaks. And so he's holding the line. He's the last man on the battlement, and his name's Slick Jimmy. And so it's kind of like interjecting myself into the book, because he's also the narrator, the not necessarily the omniscient narrator, but basically anytime the voice is heard telling the story, that would be Slick Jimmy, that would be me, but it'd also be him within the story. He's the compiler of all the lore, as it were. He has his own story and arc about what happened to him. His backstory, he was a bit of a wild child within his family before tragedy struck their family, and basically the family called it quits with Lost Peaks. But he had to have his own kind of growing up period, and in the story, he's a very famous person. Not only is he from this ridiculously wealthy and powerful family, the Eternus, or the House Eternal, he also is a very capable singer. And as you notice, I sing, so it's kind of throw to me, but I have no illusions of being a really good singer. I can hold a tune. But in this world, Slick Jimmy is... there's very few people who can sing like he can and perform like he can on stage. And he was doing this from a young age. And it was kind of like a bit of a scandal for the houses, for somebody of this powerful echelon, of this, the elite of Lost Peaks, to go into show business, which he did, and he didn't really care. So he was kind of a rock star. And at one point, he gets himself in trouble with the law, and his father, the head of House Eternal, basically leaves him and says, you have two options: go to prison, or I want you to just clean up your life. And the judge, making an example out of him, and this was a Federate judge, which says the overarching union, basically said, you need to go into the military, and if you don't, we're going to put you in prison. And his dad didn't pull any strings and said, this is what's going to happen. So Slick Jimmy went into prison, and, excuse me, I jumped the gun there. He went into the military instead of going into prison, and made his way up into this world special forces. They're called the Angels, and they go out and do stuff like Delta Force, the SEALs would do. And they fight against the other empires in the world, and an elite warrior group. And in this group, he meets a man whom he calls Zyresic, or Sick. Sick is his code name. Jimmy has his code name, which is Croon. And you never really find out each other's names until after you leave the forces, the Corps. And later on, they run into each other again, and Sick is actually X, and Sugar's adoptive father. And in this way, it kind of, because since they're kind of brothers in arms, in this way, Jimmy kind of becomes her uncle, one of her uncles, one of the people that she learns to trust. And there are not a whole lot of people in the world, but in a place like Lost Peaks, gaining somebody's trust is a pretty monumental feat. It doesn't engender a whole lot of trustworthiness, the people, how they act. There's a few others which, when this happens, and she meets people of a different paradigm, a different idea that is what we call more normal to our world, it really kind of confuses her because of how everybody in Lost Peaks is kind of a dog-eat-dog sort of thing. But Jimmy takes care of her occasionally when X is out of town or something like that. There's a couple of stories about that. She also has a governess, Ms. Crump, who is an ex-madam, high-end call girl, who has become employed as a governess by X. There's a story there, but it's not really relevant right now. Anyway, so Jimmy, to go back to him, he comes back to Lost Peaks after there was a tragedy that befalls the family, and there's a bunch of political turmoil, and the family just take off, and he kind of takes over the family business, quote unquote. And he, the family business essentially is, they own the nation. They're the royalty, but they're not like a royalty like where there's a crown and all this. They own the nation, and within the Federate, the nation and the city, they have a lot of power, but they've chosen to stand away from it. And it doesn't mean that they still don't have the lease. They're not the lease owners to all the claims, but they're the tithe, which Jimmy still enforces. They give 10% of all earnings that come out of the claims to House attorneys. They don't push it because they do have a lot of money, and they have had for a long time. Plus, the house goes back even further to other actual royal lands that go way back. So there's some heredity there that it can be explored in the different stories that go on. Again, most of this is an outline. I have put it in some of the stories, but getting too technical, if you start to get into the minutia of all these details, it bogs down the writing. I'm try to keep the story fairly rollicking, as opposed to some sort of War and Peace epic tome that has all this interplay between the different social strata, which can be fun, but you have to have limits. Victor Hugo, I am not, even though I fancy myself a smith of words. As you'll notice, I verbally, speaking out loud, I'm not as glib as some of the commentators on YouTube. I don't have that gift of gab. I wish I did, but I don't. I hope that I'm not completely boring, but probably I am, and probably people are like, he just is wandering all over, just rambling everywhere. It's a valid point. I just want to tell people the cool things I think are about this, and I'm going to go through several other things that kind of explore aspects of Lost Peaks and of this whole little girl lethal saga, and where it's going and why these things are important. I think Jimmy, there's much more I could talk about that character, but sorry about the car in the background. I tried to find a nice place to get away, but can't seem to get away from cars. All right. Anyway, I do appreciate anybody who's listening to this, because I know that it can get just a little pedantic, and you know, you got to be interested, I suppose, in what I'm putting out there. Otherwise, this just becomes boring. And if you are bored, hey, I don't blame you. I really don't. This is a new endeavor for me to try to articulate what I'm saying on YouTube and put it out there for the world to maybe gain some interest, and maybe just go, this is a bunch of hogwash. And, if you feel that way, so be it. I do like what I am doing right now. I like telling people about it, and about, this thing I have in my head. It reminds me of Tolkien's story, Leaf by Niggle. Now, Tolkien's, everybody knows, the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit and so forth, and how he built the groundwork for his world in many different volumes, and tons of notes, and lots of stories that kind of some petered out, and they've published a lot of them. But there was a story called Leaf by Niggle, and basically about a painter. This painter was he's painting the painting of a masterpiece, but he never quite finished anything because he was working and wanted to get it perfect. So he painted this leaf, and the leaf was so lifelike. It's so unbelievably lifelike. Now, there's more to the story, but essentially he dies, and when he reaches the afterlife, the leaf is this piece that this entire world that he saw in his head was just the one eyepiece. So everything that was the world that he created in his head, the leaf represented. And that's kind of what I think some of these things I'm telling you, even though they're not completely fleshed out, but I think that's what I'm trying to get at with these. So I hope that you had some good time listening, and hey, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.